And hello, we're live. Welcome to the live stream. I'm Monika Wahi, and we are now live on May 14th at noon Eastern Time. And this is for my lecture, Tips and Tricks for Giving Professional Written Feedback. And welcome if you're joining me. So, those of you who've been to my live streams lately know that we have this ongoing saga where I'm using this Restream software and I'm trying to stream to LinkedIn, YouTube, and I think I'm also streaming to Twitter. Okay. If you're watching this on Twitter, I don't know if you can interact with me, like if you can chat or anything. Um, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can chat with me. In fact, I'll turn on this chat overlay and you're going to be able to chat with me if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, you will want to chat with me. You might type in comments and you'll see them as LinkedIn comments, but I won't see them because I'm using this software. I'm not going from LinkedIn live. And in fact, I won't I figured out later I can go on LinkedIn and I can answer all the comments. So if you're on LinkedIn, I won't see any of your comments while I'm streaming. So how you can solve that is either you can go out and go and see me on YouTube. Those of you who subscribe to me should be able to find my YouTube stream. Or I think I also put it on the LinkedIn. I think I put a comment on the LinkedIn one because of this problem. So that's one thing you can do if you're on LinkedIn, just go to YouTube. If you're or you could just stay in LinkedIn and just be patient and I'll come back and answer all of the comments. What I do on YouTube is usually like the next day or day after that, I go and I update the description. I give you links and stuff to whatever we discuss because I want these live streams to not to be interactive. It's just I gotta kind of hold them regularly and attract an audience, or you guys won't show up and ask me chats. And of course, I have to start using an application that works so I can see your chats. But anyway, the reason I'm holding these live streams, I guess I could say this. I'm those of you who know me know what I'm all about. But those of you who are new to me, I'm Monika Wahi and I'm a data scientist. I'm an epidemiologist. Um but I do a lot of different things. And so one of the main things I do in my business is I help people graduate. I help them get their PhDs or their master's degrees or their data science degrees or whatever degree they're trying to get. Another thing I do is I help them after they graduate. I help them do their jobs. Like I provide mentoring and I also just do stuff. I do data science work. If you those of you who go on LinkedIn Learning, take my LinkedIn Learning courses, you see I've done a lot of data curation. I run data warehouses. I have a book on that. So I do a lot of different consulting. I sort of like half and half. I do consulting and education. And so that leads me to I started doing these live streams because I started realizing that there's sort of this connection between my consulting and my mentoring and my YouTube videos and my LinkedIn Learning, and that is that um, people tend to have the same problems with the same things, and also people are diverse, so they solve their problems different ways. So people who hire me to mentor them are people who need mentoring. But there are a lot of people who use like my YouTube videos or my LinkedIn Learning courses because they don't really need mentoring. They can figure it out themselves. They just need a little push. So I started holding these live streams to start presenting on topics that a lot of my customers come to me about and say, Monica, I need your help with this. Because that way I can give a live stream. You guys can see my advice on it in 1 hour, what I would tell you, and interact with me and ask me questions about it. And then if you need more information, you know who to go to. So this week, so sometimes it's going to be on data science stuff. Sometimes it's going to be on public health stuff because I'm an epidemiologist. Sometimes it's just going to be on anything, on just stuff, just work or school stuff you have to do with work and school. And that leads us today's topic, which is tips and tricks for giving professional written feedback. Okay. Now I don't think of myself as like this expert at giving professional written feedback or anything. Like that's not why I did this. I did this because oh, let me highlight my friend is here. CJ Hutchings, okay? you'll know that I'm collaborating with him. He's a musician. If you listen to some of my videos, he's put some music on there. Recently, he's been publishing his music on YouTube Music. Those of you who signed up for my mailing list, I send around a song a week. So I really want you to try it out. It's good stuff. It's very nice. So, hi, CJ. Thank you for showing up. I'm glad that he shows up for my live streams. Makes me feel like there's a lot of people here, right? Thank you, CJ. You're so nice. All right. So today, I'm going to be presenting on something on a topic that it's like I don't think I'm an expert. I mean, I'm good at it and I'm good at teaching it, but it's because everybody keeps asking for it, and it's how to give professional written feedback. Okay. And actually, I have slides, so I'm going to share my screen with the slides. And because this is a low budget, except when CJ's around, it's high budget, but he has to go. He's got work to do. So now it's going to be low budget, and I don't have any moderators. So I'm just going to have to be showing these slides, and every once in a while, I'll look back and I'll try to see if there are any questions. Okay. And these slides will be available afterwards when I update the YouTube. I try to add a comment in both LinkedIn and YouTube when I do that. So, tips and tricks for giving written feedback. So, why are people always asking me about that? Well, because what I realized is a lot of times we in our personal lives give feedback to each other, but we just do it like we're talking, right? Like maybe I make some banana bread for CJ and I ask CJ, do you like the banana bread? And he says, yeah. In fact, once I made a different recipe and he said it was too sweet, so I didn't make that recipe again. So that's feedback, right? It's useful feedback. It's just constructive. But the thing is, it's a lot easier when I'm like with CJ and I give him something and I see his look on his face and see it's too sweet for him, that I know what the feedback is and I know what the solution is. Like, don't make that recipe again or don't sweeten it that much again. The problem is we are faced a lot in business and in school, in the academic world, and in industry, and just a lot of different professional domains where we cannot give verbal feedback, or just giving verbal feedback is not very efficient. And I'm thinking of like software development. You send something to a customer and the customer's got to give you a list of things to change. Well, that's not very helpful if they just have a meeting with you and talk. Somebody's got to write this down, right? So you start to realize, okay, well, maybe we need to write down the feedback. Maybe that's a better way to do it, but then how? Okay. So that's what this is about. Is I have found that my different customers will have different needs for having to write down feedback. Like I just gave you one example where they have to review like some software and explain what needs to be changed, or a web page or something like that. So I'm going to give you in this presentation tips and tricks for figuring out what you're going to want to communicate in that written feedback, because you don't want to write everything, and you don't want to write forever. You want to think before you write. Like a lot of times people don't really realize that. But yeah, you want to think about, what am I actually going to write, and deciding what to actually do. Like if you're in person, you can just discuss it. You can be like, oh, maybe it's not too sweet, or maybe if you added more salt or whatever. You know what I mean? But when you're doing written feedback, you've got to kind of just decide what are you really going to say? What's worth saying, right? Then the next step is, once you decide what you're going to say, what's an effective way of actually giving the feedback, um so it improves whatever is needing to be improved. So I gave you one context in which you would give written feedback, like you're reviewing some software, you're reviewing a web page, and it might be like you hired a vendor and you have to make a list of what's wrong with it or whatever. um I'm going to go see if anybody's got a question in the chat. No. Okay. So I'm going to give you some scenarios that I encounter a lot where I'm teaching people how to give written feedback. Um, when I'm working with college students, I usually work with grad students, but sometimes I work with undergrads. And sometimes they'll give this assignment, especially to undergrads, where you write an essay, and then they give the essay to you give the draft to your peer, somebody else in the classroom, and they have to give you feedback. And I always get really angry because the teacher never really teaches, well, what exactly should you be doing, right? Because what is the feedback on? Is it to try and make it improved, like what is the improvement, like what are we trying to do in this essay? So it's like they want you to learn this, but they're not even really teaching it. Okay. Another thing that happens is, and I noticed this a lot when I taught in an undergraduate program online, because I was giving feedback. I would, like review essays, and then I just give some written feedback. And I realized I had to be very clear in my writing what I was talking about, if I was saying something was good or bad about the essay. And so I'm a professor and I'm trying to write this so that my students who are learning from me can understand. Well, I also, that's when I was teaching a college class, but I'm also like a consultant, and people will come to me and say, I'll be like a mentor, like a tutor, and they'll come to me and they'll say, Monica, my professor wrote this feedback. And I'll be like, oh my God, I have no idea what that means, or what. So it's like when you're a professor and you write feedback to the student, you're basically teaching the student how to write feedback. You're like role modeling it. And if you don't know, then you don't know what you're doing, and they don't know what you're doing, and it starts this chain of confusion. So that's where you see written feedback in college a lot. Then if you just move out of the college context into the bigger academic context, peer review, right? So those of you like me who publish in the peer reviewed literature, you write up your manuscript, you submit it, and then you get peer reviews back from other yous, other scientists. And the what I'm going to talk about in this presentation is super applicable to that, because when you're teaching in a college, like in an undergraduate program, maybe you write some feedback to students, and they don't always have to update their essay, or revise it, and then you have to look at it again. But in peer reviewed articles, if the peer reviewers give you feedback and you revise it, then they have to look at it again. And if you're the peer reviewer and you gave somebody feedback and now they fixed it, you need to make sure you feel like it was fixed. So you got to know what you were talking about, basically, when you told them to fix something. And the same thing if you're a professor and you're giving students feedback on their assignments, you're saying, you got to fix this. Well, you got to be clear with them, and you got to be able to tell whether it's fixed or not, which seems very obvious, but not, it isn't if you realize how difficult just writing is, and just if you're telling somebody write something differently or present something differently, like do they get what you're saying, and then do you know if they did it? So it becomes kind of vague. And also in academia, when you move on to doing like a master's thesis or a dissertation, if you're in a PhD program, typically you have a proposal which you have to defend, and that's a big thing you have to write. And then you have a dissertation, which is the end, after you do the project, you add on to the proposal, and it's the whole dissertation. Or some programs have you just publish 3 peer-reviewed articles. Regardless, in the process of producing those documents, you have a committee usually, or at least an advisor, and they're giving you feedback, and usually that's all done in writing. Often you'll meet with them, like you'll meet with them and they'll go over their writing, which is good. That's not, in fact, I often do that. I'll write it and then go over it if I'm really trying to teach somebody something. Um, but you still have to, it's good to have it written. People who program software and databases, they like it when you write a list of stuff for them to do, because they can just check it off and make sure that they did it, or give you feedback if they couldn't. So it's really good accountability to be good at writing um, what the feedback is you have for the student or for the teacher or whatever, and then getting back. Finally, a lot of people will try to avoid academia. Maybe they'll just work in industry, and but still in industry, I find, like in business, I find a lot of times there's an issue with, like, in business, you find that people are doing presentations a lot because they're trying to communicate stuff very quickly, and they'll ask each other, Is my presentation any good?" And I feel like that this is a place, like by email or whatever, that you can really use these skills to quickly tell them what's up with their presentation. In fact, somebody just asked me about a presentation they sent me, and I was thinking of this. because I gave him some feedback. There's also in the industry, like, let's say you apply to get something approved, like a drug approved or like a new protocol approved. There's often feedback about approval applications, where they'll say, okay, we agree with this, we don't agree with that, whatever. And whether you're the person writing it or you're the person reading it, it's good to understand how to do that written feedback. So these are just the contexts and under which my the things I'm going to tell you sort of apply. Now I'm gonna look and see if anybody has any questions. Oh, hi, Rosalie is here. Hello, everybody. Um, I think you did you write to me? I can't remember. I think you wrote to me, right? You were talking about your conference. That's you, right? I can't remember. Somebody's having a conference. I think it's you, Rosalie. But if I'm wrong, whatever. But if you're the right one, if you're the person I'm thinking of who is having the conference, go ahead and put the link in the chat if you want. Um, and if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. A lot of people are having conferences right now, and I'm trying to remember. I know you write a lot, so um, and welcome to the stream. And so maybe this is useful because you give some written feedback. All right, so now we're going to go back. So this is my first tip to you. So let's say that you're in the situation where you have to give feedback to somebody about maybe like a written thing or about a presentation. The first thing I say is avoid micromanaging style. And what do I mean by that? Well, I will often be tutoring somebody who has written something with me or I've coached her, and then she gives it to her professor for feedback, and that person will use track changes. And once you know that person will go and change our however to moreover, that person will change like silver to gray. Okay, think about what you're telling people when you do that. The message you're giving people when you do that is, first of all, that I'm smarter than you, I'm stylish, I'm classier than you. You don't have the right words. I have the right words. Okay. Another thing is you're sort of getting rid of their identity. You're sort of removing the thing that makes them them. It's really a sign of insecurity. And it's also a sign that you can just waste time doing BS like that. So when I am coaching people who are newly becoming professors and stuff, I'll say, okay, I see all these track changes that you've done. Let's just go through and remove like half of them because if it's okay, just leave it. Like, especially when I'm dealing with people who English is not their first language and they're writing in English, sometimes they write some sort of goofy sentences. But I really try to preserve the sentence as much as possible. I try to just make it correct in English. I try to rearrange things. I try to preserve that person's um voice. So that's why I say avoid micromanaging style. It's a waste of your time to do, and you want to preserve their voice. And instead, think in terms of trying to help the authors avoid being obviously stupid or obviously wrong or looking stupid. Okay. I'll give you an example. I was working with a surgeon named Steve. He was a surgical educator. And we worked together a lot of things, but I'm not a surgeon. I'm not a surgical educator. And I wrote a book chapter with him. I wrote the first draft. And it really didn't sound right. You know, Be- uh, he pointed it out to me. He said, Monica, some of this writing just doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound like a surgical educator. So I said, okay, why don't you go through it and change it? And what was interesting is he hardly made any changes, but where he made changes, I understood. It was changes where I was talking about how students think and how students act. And I realized I don't know how students think and students act in surgery, but he did. He taught them. And so he just changed what I had written so I didn't look stupid anymore. What I was saying didn't look naive. And that's kind of a way that I think when I'm changing the English of people who are not that good at English is I want them to be saying what they're trying to say, but just not sound goofy or weird about it. Okay? Now, the sometimes I'll see people who are giving feedback and they're like, "You need to add this. You forgot that." Blah, blah, blah. Well, you do need to make sure they cover everything. That's important. but space is always limited, right? So if you're in a peer reviewed article, if you're a reviewer and you're like, you need to add these tables, whatever, the journal has rules, right? You can't just add everything. So I always ask myself if I really need to tell them to add something. And if I need to tell them to add something, like they're missing something, I have to kind of tell them what can be sacrificed so they can make room for it. So so decide if you really want them to add an important point you think it belongs there, then you got to also tell them where to remove stuff. Um and then just finally, as a general rule, if something is obviously wrong, be very clear about what it is and why it's wrong. And I will review papers where there is a critical study design problem that is going to make it so that they can't analyze the data. They can't really make anything of their research. And I will just say it. um, those get published anyway. I mean, I'll see them published elsewhere, but still, the best you can do is just be honest and compassionate and kind, but just be honest. All right. So that's about prioritizing what needs to be changing. What's kind of good about doing that is you don't want to just write randomly a lot, about everything. You want to just pick out what's important and write because you're going to write this and they're probably going to have to change it. So just prioritize what's important. All right. So then the next tip is once you sit down to write and you say, okay, I've decided what's wrong, communicate clearly about what you want changed and think in terms of the outcome. Like if they return it, if they actually changed it and returned it to you, what do you want to see it look like? Do you want to see a table in it that wasn't there? Or do you want to see a discussion, a paragraph about some sort of thing? Um, Explaining what you want to see is a lot easier than saying how you want it changed. But sometimes you sort of have to get into that. Like I'll say, remove this section because it's not necessary. Like a lot of times people are not very clear, like they don't know what they're doing with their statistics and they'll just make a million tables. And I'll tell them, only these, you only really need these tables, but in that space, I want to see a discussion of your methods, which you missed, so I think about the outcome and I'll even like literally say, okay, write a paragraph and put it here, write a sentence that says blah, 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 and put it there. And you'll see that other people who give feedback a lot, sometimes they'll do that too. And you might be like, okay, this is a pain, or irritating, but it actually is super helpful because you can just copy and paste it and that person's going to be happy. And so and so in other words, if you think when you're giving the feedback in terms of what you want the revision to look like, it's easier for you to communicate the feedback and say this is what I want to see rather than what's wrong. Like, oh, this table is so unclear, I can't understand which is the standard deviation, I can't understand where the columns are. No, you just say, well, when you fix this table, I want to see three columns. In this column, I want this. In that column, I want that. That's sort of how I do it. And I'll tell you, examples really help. So you'll see on the slide there's a link, and it's a link to a paper that I wrote with my co-author, who I just love. I'm going to meet with her later today. She and I did a study, and the study used the Maslow burnout inventory, which is an instrument. So those of you who use instruments, they're sort of like special questionnaires that you can score. You can make a score out of, and the score means something. And as you can see on the slide, there's a table there from the paper that shows you how to interpret the MBI scores. There's three domains or three subscores. There's emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and personal achievement or personal appreciation. They call it different things. And you'll see that in that table, it says there's a low level burnout, moderate burnout, and high level burnout. And just the classifications of those scores. So if you took the Maslow burnout inventory and you added up your score, you could go see how burnt out you are on those different scales, right? Okay. That and actually we did that. We did that with a bunch of dentists and a bunch of dental students in Saudi Arabia. You can read the paper. And then we also did a scatter plot between satisfaction. We did a satisfaction instrument on them and their emotional exhaustion. Because, and as you can see, the more satisfied you are with your job, the less emotionally exhausted you are, and vice versa. I know this is like, is this a surprise? Well, of course, my colleagues are very concerned that people are exhausted and burnt out at her workplace. Like, I love her. She was smart to do the study, and so they had to do something about it. If you want a vacation at work, just copy your study design, right? But why am I telling you this? Why did I even put this on the slide? Because even though the study is not like some landmark study, this way of presenting instrument scoring rules is super clear. And whenever I review instruments, most of the time, like, or papers that have instruments in them where they're using, I don't know, like, anxiety measurement, or a management styles, or things like that, they usually forget to put the scoring rules or any sort of scoring information. And so when I give them feedback, I always refer to this paper. Whenever I want to see a scatter plot, I refer to this paper. Even though it's a scatter plot about job satisfaction for dentists and burnout in dentists, you could be doing a scatter plot of like systolic blood pressure and diastolic blood pressure. It doesn't really matter. It just is an example. And then I can say, because when you're writing, you often can't show a picture, like you can't even put an emoji. So I'll have to say when I'm giving feedback, okay, go to this article, go to figure blah blah blah. See how it says emotional exhaustion and dentist satisfaction score? Instead, make it be this and do this, right? Like, literally, I'll do that, because then that kind of really tells the story of what I want to see. Um, it really communicates my ideas of what I see. And also, if they can't do it, or if it comes out a little goofy or whatever, or they do something else, they can explain to me that they got it, but they decided to do something else. Whatever. It just improves communication back and forth, because that's what's happening. All right. Let me just see if anybody's got any questions. Oh, hi there. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome, Chenier. Your teachings are quite educative. Thank you very much, Monica. Well, I'm very happy you say so. Excellent. Okay. Well, I don't see any questions. Thank you for giving some encouragement. All right. So, moving on to just kind of a summary of do's and don'ts for giving written feedback. So, for my do's, do be clear about how you want the document to be after it is changed. Okay. And do provide examples from other written works and or references to support your points. That's another thing I'll do is, if I'm saying, hey, this point you made isn't quite right, I'll often look up references in the literature and put links and stuff and say these people explain it. Basically, you're trying to help the authors do a better job of making their points. You're trying to be on their side, and you're trying to help them, which is sort of a weird way of thinking about things. Like, when we're teachers, we're like, now, you aren't getting an A. But if we're really teaching in grad school and stuff, we're teaching our colleagues, right? So we should be acting more like, honey, let me help you do a better job of this, or let me help you be clear about this. I kind of see what you're doing. Let's go. You know, we really should adopt a collegial voice. And also, you know, I have a customer, and she's a junior researcher, like she's a professor, and she's being a colleague. She's doing a study with a dean. So it's not her dean, a dean of a different college. They're collaborating on something. And she's the head of the study group. She's a PI. And she said, Monica, I feel very uncomfortable giving feedback to the dean about this research stuff she's doing. Like, she wanted to do certain research questions and things. She goes, I feel uncomfortable. She's a dean. How do I do that? I don't have the right attitude, like I'm a junior person. But what actually happened to me is this kind of feedback I'm usually giving to surgeons, like my surgeon friend, right? Or doctors. And what am I? I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. I'm not anything. I have an MPH, CPH, right? Like, I don't have a PhD. So, how is it that they accept my feedback? Well, if you talk about it like I said, that sort of collegial way, like, okay, here, let me help you. I kind of see what you're doing. Let me help you make your point, or I think I know what you're trying to do. That approach, along with just turning it into something that's not really um emotional. So, um like, if somebody has a chart, like a bar chart, and you just can't read it, and it's frustrating you, you feel emotional. But if you check your emotion, you just say to that person, like, I am looking at your bar chart and I am having trouble understanding it. Like, I can see myself typing this. I do not really understand what the bars represent. I do not know what their height means because there is nothing written on the y-axis. I think that you mean that you are comparing two groups because there's two colors, but I don't know which these groups are because there's three groups in your study. Like, see how I'm saying that instead of, oh my God, look at this stupid bar chart. What the hell? How am I supposed to figure this out? Like that's what I'm thinking. But when I write, I'm writing, um, I see you're trying to make a comparison, but I am confused as to what. Notice I use the word I a lot. If you say I a lot, people don't feel attacked. If you say you, that's attacking. Right. So I just kind of say I a lot. I use I statements in my feedback, and I'm telling the truth. Like often, like I'll say I didn't understand the sentence. I looked for a reference and I couldn't find one. Well, maybe I'm just bad at looking for references. So it preserves a lot of, and remember all of this is written down, people are going to read it, so you kind of want to write something down that if somebody finds it and reads it, you're like, okay, well this person confesses that she's stupid, but she's not really, criticizing people. And I'll even talk to the students that way, even students who don't really know what they're doing and are being kind of rude, because sometimes it breaks barriers. They start to, students, people who look up to you, they start copying you no matter what, like, even if you don't really think about it. So if you do nice things and treat them nicely, they start sometimes treating you nicely by accident. Which brings me, I'm going to start with the don'ts. Don't be 100% negative in your feedback. Most of the time, I try to find, well, I'll just say most of the time, naturally, there's some really good things about what I'm giving feedback about. And it just bubbles to the top and it just comes right out. I say, oh my God, look at this gorgeous visualization. Or I really love how you organize this argument. I'll say it and I'll use I too again. Um, if I find I'm writing a lot of sort of constructive but kind of negative feedback, like I don't understand why you did these statistics. I don't understand why we have all these figures. I think you only need two figures. Like I'm saying some stressful stuff. I often will just go and pick out something important that is good about it. Like I'll say, this is a tough topic and it's hard to visualize, but it's really good that the authors are tackling it because they're experts and they're willing to do the work and try to communicate this, things like that. And I'm honest, I don't BS. Everybody who knows me says, like, knows I just am too honest, actually. Like I can't make it up if it's not good. But there's usually something good about everything you read. Like even just people calling attention to the issue can be a good thing. Um, and the next thing is don't criticize without offering a fix. In fact, I usually focus on the fix and not so much the criticism. Like with the bar chart thing I was giving the description, that whole thing is so confusing. It's hard to focus on a fix. But if it's like something, like if you're like, okay, this table is great, but there's too much in it, just move X, Y, and Z to a different table. There, that's it. That's the, criticize. Here's the fix. Um, don't criticize without trying to figure out what the authors were trying to accomplish. Um, so one of the things is people do some goofy things, some weird things. I've seen just like the weirdest things. And the first thing I want to say is don't, like, stop. Oh my God, I can't handle what you're doing. Like they'll, for instance, give you all the data. They'll just give you a data sheet in, like, as a table, and you're like, you need to analyze this or something, you know what I mean? And but before I go, oh my God, I sit down and go, why did they give me the whole data sheet? Why did they do this? What were they trying to do? Like I'm remembering particularly one where it was a long time ago. It is a paper that's been published. Um, where when I was actually a public health student, this guy came to me. It was a friend of a friend, and he showed me this pie chart that looked like a color wheel because there were so many categories. There was like, I don't know, 20 categories. You're not supposed to do that with a pie chart. So I said, sweetie, what are you trying to do here? And it turns out he was trying to sort of make like a dendrogram, like a flow chart about how decisions were made in a path lab about different slides. You can probably look it up. Maybe I'll link it to it on the description. But when I looked at that pie chart, I was laughing. He has a sense of humor. But I said, "Well, what were you trying to do?" I really tried to understand. Well, if I had been giving written feedback, what I wouldn't have been able to ask him. I would have tried to read everything and see why is it he gave this really ineffective pie chart. What was he trying to explain? And then I would have probably proposed, like I did in real life, this flow chart instead. And again, my final don't, which actually was the first thing I said because I feel so strongly about it, is don't micromanage style. And I sometimes have to tell myself that too. I remind myself, if it's not incorrect, leave it alone. Like if it's not wrong, just leave it. Okay. Because that person gets to say their thing. They get to use their voice. Okay. Let me go ask, see if anybody's asking questions. Oh, it's Spaghetti Dude. I think you will not. I always remember you. Who can forget Spaghetti Dude? Thanks for coming by. Yeah, like I don't even know who you really are, Spaghetti Dude. I just like imagine this like the superhero made out of spaghetti. I don't know. Do you throw yourself against the wall, so to speak? Too much fun. Too much fun. I'm just happy you showed up. All right. Well, then let me get back to to the special here. I try to do a special offer if you actually show up to my recorded live stream, or you show up to my recorded live stream. Show up to my live stream or watch the recording of my live stream. That's what happens when I don't have a moderator and I have to think and talk at the same time. So this is what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a special offer of a file review. I said file because I was going to say document, like you could give me a peer-reviewed article you're trying to write or a grant or something. Um, but I realized somebody might give me like a website they're making or a dashboard they're making, because we're in data science, some of us, and or something else like a presentation, whatever. You want to give me something that you want feedback on, I'll give you feedback. I'll give you written feedback like I've been describing I do. And ooh, I got dry mouth, just like I think I had some water. So pick out anything you want me to give you feedback on. I guess if it's pretty long, I probably won't give you feedback on the whole thing, but if it's short, I'll give you feedback. Sorry, it's just been so dry around here. So the process would be is that you have to send me by email or LinkedIn your current Word version of the document, or if it's PowerPoint, or if it's a link or whatever, just send it to me and explain what you're doing. Is this your personal statement and you're trying to go into a dental program, or like, don't go into my friends, everybody's burnt out. Just kidding. No, I think I think she reformed it. I'm going to ask her when I talk to her today. So, whatever it is you're trying to do, what is this document? What is this file? Then I'll send you a PayPal so you can pay the fee. And then I'll write you a professional peer review in Word. I'll send it back to you. And then that will give you both an example of me giving feedback, hopefully you can learn from. And I'll give you feedback. I'll give you some good tips to improve whenever you're writing. I'm sorry, I don't know why I have this having this problem with coughing. Good thing we're at the end of the live stream, right? Let me stop sharing this. All right, so, sorry, I'm coughing now. All right, so to summarize, it's a lot of different situations throughout school, work, your professional life, where you're stuck giving feedback through a written medium about other things. And you may be stuck in a situation where that feedback follows you around for a while. Like you're a professor on a dissertation committee, or you're the student getting their dissertation, or you're a developer and you're making an application and this is your customer giving you feedback about the application, so you're gonna have to fix everything. and they're going to look to see if they're fixed. So these were the tips and tricks that I use, to try and make that process go as good as possible, and also to keep relationships positive, because especially if you have like a customer and you're always going back to them and getting feedback, or they're giving you feedback, you don't want to piss them off and have bad blood between you two. So it's really good to use these compassionate, clear, sort of bureaucratic, removed, accurate ways of communicating, and also just deciding, prioritizing only the most important things, only what's really necessary needs to be changed, and then we'll go from there. All right. Well, unless I see any more questions, and again, I apologize. Those of you, I guess I probably should repeat this. Those of you who are listening to this from LinkedIn, although I see Vrushali's chat came through, a lot of chats don't come through from LinkedIn. So if you asked, if you said anything and you don't see it on that chat overlay, I didn't see it either. So you'll just have to wait. I'll go back and I'll answer it. I figured out how to look up the comments on LinkedIn and answer them. All right. And then also, if you're hearing this and later, like this is recorded or whatever, in the next day or two, I'll go through the description to this video, and I'll update it with some timestamps and some links and stuff, and you can get these slides that I showed. And then that way, so those of you who are listening on LinkedIn and you're thinking, okay, I want to come back, you probably want to come back onto YouTube, because the description will be there. It'll be easier to navigate. So I'm trying to hold these, every Saturday. If you connect with me on LinkedIn or subscribe to my YouTube channel, it should be easy for you to find these live streams, and then you can show up and ask me questions and get some tips and tricks. All right. Well, it's a beautiful Saturday day. It's a lovely weekend, and I hope you have fun and enjoy it. And I'll talk to you next week. Bye bye, everybody.